Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to another show, and this is all about the Great Fife Bungalow, why it's back in fashion, or perhaps why it never actually really went out. But as always, before we get into it, let's QVT. So, bungalows, or as we often like to say, like hen's teeth, because they're hard to come by. And it's true, and it's in an age of towering new builds, whether it be flats or the three-story townhouses or the big detached properties. There's something really refreshing about a bungalow, but also the practicality that comes with them. You've got no stairs, you've got no kind of split level, and obviously maybe disjointed layouts. And it's plain and simple, all one level homes that offer that practicality, privacy, and there is also the premium there. You do pay a premium for a bungalow. And it's because we're all aware that they are very limited and really hard to come by. Because actually, if you had asked the average house hunter a decade ago to rank their dream home, the bungalow probably would have paid quite low on that list. But today, completely opposite. And it is changing quite fast because demand is absolutely outstripping supply. Whether it be, prices are rising faster than many other property types because obviously people have become switched on to the fact they're a premium. So actually we can charge more for them because the demand is absolutely there. Especially in some parts of the countries, bungalows then start getting almost like this bidding war aspect, especially if it's in, as I say, different areas where you've kind of got some posh home county estate agencies, and it really is a kind of race for space and race for that one level living. But actually, what we need to look at is what's behind this and why are bungalows back in fashion, especially for those that are perhaps in their 40s, 50s. But I even know, obviously, even first time buyers and couples that are doing one level living because that's just the living option that they want, because they can still perhaps think about extending out to the side, or are they perhaps buying a bungalow, but they have got the option to extend above. So, yes, it's 40s and 50s, but you do see buyers a lot younger than that as well.
And a lot older as well, Sophie. I mean, certainly I'm out at a lot of clients at the moment who everyone's living longer, aren't they? And people still want to have a lovely home. So perhaps they're living in a big 4-bedroom house that just is too much to maintain. They can't cope with stairs, etc. So there's a lot of downsizers as well fall into the category of bungalow hunting, isn't there? And also, as you get older, you've got health requirements. So that impacts things as well, doesn't it, with regards to what you would like. So you want that one level living space where you're not necessarily having to concern yourself with stairs and entry, and still enjoy the home and be part of everything that's going in the home, isn't it?
Correct, absolutely. And that's why we want to look at why the buyers and sellers need to kind of understand about this kind of deceptively simple property type. So what do we mean by that, Perry?
I think for me, it's about understanding the underdog of British housing. And I think they've always had the butt of the joke, the bungalow, isn't it? Certainly for me, it's always been the kind of poor twin in the bungalow. It's like, why would you live there? It's a small, cramped home. And some of them the rooms are smaller. Sometimes the space is smaller. But actually, nowadays, you actually get some really lovely large ones. And as you said earlier on, the whole part of people extending as well just gives people so much more extra space with them. But they have kind of looked like the poor choice in the past. But I think you could say that possibly about a lot of properties, can't you? But certainly there has been a big change in that. But they can be dismissed sometimes as just, oh, they're only for the elderly. And as you said, actually, we're seeing young families choosing to do that because what they're wanting to do is buy a property, invest in it, and living it as their forever home. So they're almost future proofing it for themselves. So we definitely see all age groups now falling into the category of bungalow hunting. Whereas if you look at kind of pre and post war, they always kind of seemed very much like that's where you put the elderly people when there was nowhere else to put them, which is not really a good image for them, is it? And also, it was also sometimes seen as a temporary fix, so they'll only be there for a year and then perhaps actually we could just move on. But actually now what we're seeing is that people are living so much longer, they're living healthier lifestyles, and they can actually enjoy it. So the perception is kind of been masked a little bit with the bungalows, that they're rare, that they're valuable, that they often sit on plots as well that developers would kill for. And that's why you see with the bungalows, generally they have a lot of outside space because that's how they were designed back in the day when they were first built, of course. But actually when you see the modern bungalows now, which are very rare, I think the only ones that I've really seen built recently, a couple of years ago, you had the many that were built in years, but how quickly did they go, Sophie?
Oh, unbelievable. Absolutely.
And at the moment, East Weems and now Colton of Weems are a new development there. So there are some bungalows there as well. But in the majority, house builders build bigger homes because they get more for their money, because they could put more property on that plot. So historically, the larger plots with the older style bungalows are definitely sought after now because you've got so much space, and it ticks that box that you mentioned earlier, where actually if they wanted to extend, they're adding beautiful extensions onto the back with bifolding windows, doors that go into the garden. So it just makes such a big difference. And they know that that's their forever home. There's no need to be moving again. So there is a little bit about that as well. But having said that, two-storey semis and terraces still fill the suburbs. Bungalows occupy wide plots, which have usually got generous gardens. They've generally got large driveways, but they've got so much of the future potential as well. But actually, if you look at investors as well, what they're saying is actually, I could knock this down and build 2 or 3 houses on here. So there's different ways to look at it. So you've got families who want to live in that because they love the garden space and can make the house bigger. But you've got developers as well who see a huge opportunity here to build other homes. But then that limits the future for others in regards to, well, what can they have? And when they're ready to have that bungalow, is there going to be any out there? And it is a rarity. So it's definitely something that we know goes really quick. I mean, we had one recently and actually it sold on day one of the pre-portal. It didn't even go further than that. So they do get scooped up really quickly. So if that's the kind of market people are in, yeah, they need to be organised and ready to go if they're interested in that. But why do people love them so much? That's a big question, isn't it?
Absolutely. And we've kind of touched on a couple of the reasons why, but we're going to go into a wee bit more detail because, as we've mentioned, it's not just your typical kind of retirees. They aren't the kind of main fuel for the demand. While they obviously do hold that kind of core demographic, there is other, obviously, age brackets that are leaning towards that as well, as we've touched on. But there are kind of like 5 key reasons why buyers are almost falling back in love with bungalows. First one, single level living. Take away the stairs, get rid of that, and it might sound like a small thing to some, but actually try living without them. And then you go, oh, I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to go back to stairs. No, it's just from the practicality side of it to also health reasons, perhaps, and the mobility options, or even people just like the general flow and having everything on that one level. So there is obviously different reasons for the single level living. You then also future proofing. Buyers are thinking long term. It's your biggest investment in life. So people are thinking long term and what does this look like? And absolutely, you might be sitting here thinking, well, I'm only perhaps in my 50s. My health is absolutely fine. I've not got any, health concerns. But actually, they're looking for a home that they can grow old in. Because what we always say to our clients when we're doing these valuations is, it's always better to make the decision to move while you can make that decision and you're still able to do that decision, because then you're doing it in your own time without any extra pressures and trying to alleviate any extra stress. But if you leave it until crunch time when you're perhaps maybe not as able or your health has, declined, that's then when the stress just gets mounted on you. The pressure just obviously bubbles over. So yes, you might be thinking, well, I'm absolutely fine now. That's great. This might be the time to move while you're able to. So that's why people do it, for future proofing aspects as well. Then obviously we've touched on the extension and the rebuild potential of a property. Obviously you've touched on the plot size, Perrie, and what that means. If people do want to extend in any direction, even if it's to go up as well, people do that. Or even, as you say, total redevelopment. Always make sure to get your planning with these, though. Don't just go off on a willy-nilly and just go gung-ho. Please consult and get advice. Also, as well, it's an element of the privacy and the peace that you get that. Because if you think about it, if you're in perhaps an area that's got a lot of bungalows, there is obviously, you don't feel towered over. You have got obviously a bit more kind of privacy. You might also then be able to open up and see more views as well if there's not as many kind of high towering properties. And they do tend to be, when you think about bungalows, they do tend to be like cul-de-sacs or within a street where it's all similar type of properties, and again a similar kind of demographic, so it is a more quieter kind of lifestyle, which obviously we all love a nice quiet lifestyle, and when we're all busy and hustling about and we've got a lot going on. And then finally, it's the kind of scarcity of them. So there's very few bungalows are built today, and you've touched on the reasons why, in terms of it's a numbers game at the end of the day. Developers are looking what cash they can get in the bank. So if they can get more cash in the bank, having two properties on a plot that would just have a bungalow, it's kind of a no-brainer. But obviously that has kind of then meant there is this gap in the market. National house builders, they focus on density. And it's all about the profit. As I say, it's a numbers game. So that's also where there is that scarcity of, there's not enough bungalows on the market for people because the demand's absolutely there. So that's why then people naturally have to then fall for kind of ground floor flats. And we've seen a lot of that. Well, you've brought on a lot of ground floor flats recently, Perrie, that have got snapped up for that one level living element because they can't get a bungalow. So the next option is actually a one level living apartment, because where are the bungalows that people can also afford? Because if there is new build ones going as well, the new build ones are absolutely through the roof in terms of pricing because there's a premium for them, and they're perhaps not even going to be ready anytime soon, and perhaps you need that one level living like yesterday, not waiting for it to obviously be built. So there is loads of different reasons why. But what would you say the Fife market says about bungalows?
I think actually we've got a comment here from Jim. I'm just going to show it because I think that really tells exactly what this is all about, and then we can talk about the actual stats in the Fife market. But what Jim is saying here is that bungalows are essential to the mix of housing tenure. As the baby boomers downsize to them, it releases larger properties for the younger generation to upgrade to, which is exactly what we've been saying earlier on. And actually, there is a need to build more for our aging population. And I think we all know that. And that's where actually builders are really struggling to achieve that, because they're thinking about the numbers in pounds rather than actually what they're bringing to that plot size. But absolutely, it's a great point, and definitely we see that. And when we had those ones in St Monans, how quickly did they get snapped up? It was crazy how quickly that went, but we definitely need to see more of them. But yeah, so if we look at what the Fife market is saying about them, examining the data for the last 2 years, we get a feel for what the listings look like. So a total of just under 1,200 bungalows came onto the market in Fife, accounting for 9.1% of all new property listings in that 2-year window. This figure is absolutely interesting because what it does is, compared to the national average is only 7.9 of properties listed that were bungalows. So in Fife, we're seeing a higher listing of bungalows in percentage over the last 2 years. So it must be this beautiful country we live in that makes us last longer in our lives and enjoy the outside space, all this fresh sea air and countryside that we're getting in Fife. But it just shows you, just shy of 10% of all property listings for bungalow. That sounds like a lot, but actually it's not when you think 90% was everything else. So it's a very small window, considering we have an aging population who really do need them, who are living in large homes and can't actually move forward. So it's causing so much pressure on their lifestyles because they're having to live in these large houses that they're really struggling to maintain. And what then will happen, of course, throughout the years is that they will slowly degenerate the property, because maybe they don't live upstairs now, they can only live downstairs. And so, then that becomes a bit of a trial and tribulation for that seller as well, isn't it? And health issues come into play as well, of course. So that can play a bit of a part in it as well for them. But in that same 2-year window, as I say, 1,019 bungalows in Fife were sold and completed. So whilst 1,200 went to market, over 1,000 completed. So that's generally actually quite similar to what we see as a whole in regards to property, isn't it? Because normally 82% of what comes to market will complete. By completing, what we mean is that keys exchanged, money in the bank, and for whatever reason people will withdraw. And if you think about bungalows as well, then you've possibly got an aging population in those as well, and God willing, sometimes actually become deceased before the property can complete. So there's various reasons of why things will happen, and that's obviously very sad when that does occur, but that would be where that comes into play. But the average sale price as well of a bungalow in Fife was just over £240,000. That's working out at £243 per square foot. Let's compare that with the 9,418 houses and flats that sold in the same period, with an average price of 202,000, so nearly 40,000 less, and it also equates to £190 per square foot. So again, that's £53 per square foot different in price. So you can see that they definitely have a premium, and they are very sought after. And actually, what we see as well is that generally people go all out to get them, so they tend to pay much more for them, which obviously is rising that price in regards to the value of a bungalow.
Correct, absolutely. And that's why we'll always say to clients as well, and you'll have it all the time, Perrie, as well, when you go out to valuations and they've got a property to sell and they're only moving for a bungalow, but they won't go to market until they find that bungalow. So then you hit this stalemate, because as well, we know that as soon as a bungalow gets brought to market, it gets snapped up for a great price, but position comes into play as well. Yes, you've got to be able to, you've got to be able to go offers over, because it is a premium property that's wanted, but position. So when we're sitting with clients and we're trying to educate them and say, look, if you're looking for a bungalow, you need to get yourself in the best position, because not only are you up against a lot of people looking for that type of property, there's a lot of positions coming as well forward. Yeah. So we always find that as well, if you are looking for a bungalow and that is what you need to get yourself market ready and be in the best position possible, which does seem daunting going to market when you've not found anything. But as you've seen there, 1,200 bungalows came to market in the last 2 years. So they are coming to market. You just need to get yourself standing out. But that is something we come across quite a lot.
I agree. So let's look at that saleability. When we talk about that, what we mean by saleability is the percentage of the properties that sell from exchanging contracts to completion and move on, into their new properties. So in Fife, the bungalows actually outrank the average, because the average is 82% complete, but bungalows are 88.8% of bungalows that came to the market ended up selling and moving. That's a large proportion. The remainder remained unsold, and there could be reasons for that. I was at one, for instance, the other day where actually sadly the parent passed away before the house sale completed. The son has now decided he's going to live in the house. So there's various reasons why things will happen like that. But that 88.8% compares to 85.7% for flats, 80.2% for houses, which is what we say roughly is around about 82 when you look at both of those together. But nationally, that picture differs dramatically, because this is only Fife we're speaking about. If you look at nationally, only 60.6% of bungalows complete to sale. So that's a whopping 28% less. But only 46.3% of flats and 56.2% of houses do the same. So Fife, no matter which category you're in, it's vastly improved. I mean, if you look at the overall houses at 56.2% compared to 80.2%, that's a massive difference, isn't it? It's nearly 30%, like 25% difference. So it's a big difference. But these figures underline for me the enduring appeal and also the substantial value that bungalows have in our local market in Fife, and actually will always retain that, because they're going to be sought after. They are a rarity. There aren't many new ones being built. We spoke about that. St Mona's one's completed. We've got ones in East Weems that have just completed. Colton of Weems are starting to build a few. But again, when you look at the actual number of houses that are being built on that site, only 10% of them are bungalows. So again, it goes back to this, what we're saying of what's coming to market in regards to the 10% point. It just seems to never exceed that point. So quite interesting. But if we had someone who was a bungalow seller, what advice would you give, Sophie?
Oh, if you are sitting in a Fife bungalow just now, especially in a sought after area, and you're considering a move in the not too distant future, then you do need to strongly think that is now the time to have the conversation. Get an agent out to you. We can discuss your accurate value, what the market is like in your particular area, and then what next steps look like. Because you've just said, Perrie, there was a property that sold day one of pre-portal, and we know with that property there was other people that missed out on that property. They were for that property, but the first person saw the pre-portal, made obviously an offer that the seller couldn't refuse, and it was snapped up. So we know that there is people out there that are registered on our database that are looking for bungalows. So if you are thinking of selling, then absolutely now is the time to have a conversation. Let us discuss your value. And something that I touched on earlier, if it's almost like you're nervous to go to market because you've not found anywhere yet, you've not secured anything, so you're putting your property on the market without knowing where you're going. And we have this conversation day in, day out, and this also doesn't just relate to bungalows, we get this all the time. But if you are worried about that, because it is almost like that, what came first, the chicken or the egg, then that is what us as an agent, as the experts, that is for us to manage. If you're concerned about not being able to find a home, then say that to us, speak with us. One, we will make it our mission to find you your next home, and we will work with you to find that next home. But if while we're finding your home, your buyer comes along, great. You've secured a buyer. One, you know what their offer is, so you also know what you have to play with. Two, you know their timescales because you don't know what their journey looks like. But then what we do in our agency is we offer like an extended entry date or a long entry date. And the longest I think that we have done is a year. We found the buyer, we know what the offer is, we have then secured a buyer, and it's just a year-long entry date. That then takes the pressure off. That gives you time to find the right home. But we've secured your buyer, we've got them locked in, and we can even get them to sign missives as well, so that they are locked in if that's something that you're nervous about. But that is what we do. And again, that is where you are entrusting the right agent that has your best interest, that knows what they're doing to get you through that next process. And at any time, obviously, during the process, you have questions or concerns, you just have to speak to your agent and ask them. But our job is to also get it priced accordingly. Pricing is absolutely crucial. You don't want to go too high because obviously you're at the risk of scaring off buyers, but we also, like any properties, we don't want to undervalue them either. Our job is to obviously get you as much money in your pocket and attract the right buyers, and then start the negotiations. So that is what it's all about. Pricing is absolutely crucial. And an experienced agent will know how to position the bungalow to attract the correct type of buyer, whether it be, as we've touched on, a family, a downsizer, someone planning their forever home. That is for our job to obviously find you that correct buyer. But it does seem daunting going to market without finding your next property. It does, we get that. But trust us, we do this day in, day out. We manage that cycle. We manage you through that journey. It puts you in the best position as well. So if you are considering selling, you're sitting in a bungalow, you are sitting in a premium just now. So please reach out. Absolutely. But do you have any kind of final thoughts at all, Perrie?
I think for me, when we talk about the stats, it's always can be a bit disconnecting when you're listening to the show, but actually the link for the show is in here. The article is here as well. Literally, you could read through this article in 5 minutes. So if you are interested in more detail and information, if you're a statistics orientated person, or you just maybe didn't quite catch something, or the discovery of what we were discussing, by all means feel free to read the article. But again, Sophie's correct. Get some really good advice, get some understanding, find someone that's going to work with you in regards to your agency, in regards to the fact that actually you don't necessarily need to put a for sale board up. We could work behind the scenes to work towards your goal as well. So there's always a discreet way of us doing that for you as well. But just reach out and get some good advice. Perfect. And that would be it.
Absolutely. Well, there we go. And I'm sure we'll see you next week for another show. But that was a great one. And as we say, any questions, come back to us.
Perfect. Thanks very much. All take care. Have a good day.